Welcome back. This is the From A to Z podcast. This episode, I'm chilling with an ad man, a father. He's also an author. He is the co-founder of an agency that is known for making things go boom, aka viral. I am speaking to none other than Mike Sharman. Thank you so much, Mike, for joining me.
How's it, man? Thanks for having me. What
really
a cool time
appreciate
to start off the year, talking about ads and virality and all that cool stuff.
Right? Let's jump right into it. But before we do that, everybody, please go ahead, like, subscribe, comment, and share. Make this thing go boom.
From A to Z, it's plain to see. This podcast is about people in my industry. Writers, designers, social media managers. Don't forget the data miners. HR, PR, find out who they are and how they made it this far. From A to Z, talk about your family. Talk about the goals you reach. Talk about the plans you see. Let's get it. Welcome aboard. I'm your host, P. Whitney, and this is the From A to Z podcast.
Now, you ready to go from A to Z?
Cool, man. Let's do it.
Let's go. So, started off, your aura tells me you're a Joburg boy, born and bred. Am I right?
By Chase. Yeah, born and bred in Johannesburg, and pretty much spent my entire childhood here. And then after I got to that tricky decision-making period of like, what do you do after school? And, you know, pressure from family, community, teachers, aptitude tests, all of those kinds of things, you know. And I think there's probably a lot of young people out there at the moment, like trying to decide what they want to do with their lives. Like if you're finishing off matric, if you're just starting matric, if you're starting university, if you have the privilege to do such, you know, like what am I going to be when I'm big? And even if you don't have the means or the opportunities to go to tertiary, like what are you going to do with your life? And for me, I had a lot of real great interest in wanting to be an actor. Like that was kind of where it all started, and my parents were panicked by that decision. They were like, no, there's no money in acting. You can't get a bond, you can't have medical aid. Those are two white parents' biggest fears, not having a bond and not having medical aid. And yeah, eventually just for the safety net of being able to study, I fortunately had good enough marks in matric, so I got some really good discounted rates at then RAL, which is now UJ. Went and studied a BA.
We'll talk about all of that.
Okay.
Sorry, we got to start from A, then get into C.
Okay, I've already jumped to J or K.
But now that you're in your schooling, I know that you went to King Edward.
King Edward the 7th school,
Yeah,
yes.
how was that? How was that boys' school and everything? What was your experience like?
Yeah, you know, I mean, coming out of primary school, I'd been to a co-ed school and then going to K's, it was a bit of an eye-opener. I think especially so many kids, you realize when you're like 12 or 13 years old, you think that you are a hero. You think you're on top of the world. And you really come back to reality. Like when I started grade 8, it was the last year or two of corporal punishment. So
you still got it.
You still get a caning. So I was a very well-behaved little boy.
Nice.
I didn't want to make friends with any canes. Matrics were a lot more hardcore. The guys in boarding also, you know, they had a few rough moments of introduction to the real world. And it was a whole different world. Like you realize how close-minded you are when you come out of primary school and how there's just like these adults, like matrics were basically adults, right? And exposed to a whole new way of thinking, a whole new way of having to go out and find your own territory. And it is like boys' schools have this kind of stigma of everyone's a sheep, everyone has the same haircut. It was the middle parting when I was that age. And you know, what you're going to do. And I think for me in particular, it really helped carve what I was interested in. Like there was so many different things after school. Like you could go into drama, you could go to debating, public speaking, there's sport, art class, all those kinds of things. And I think that's where it really showed me the different opportunities that exist in the real world, even though it's quasi protected from reality.
What about some of your favorite ads? I guess you were in boarding school, so you weren't watching much TV, were you?
No, I was actually fortunate enough to be a day boy. I was one of the
nice.
the inverted commas soft day boys that stayed at home. But yeah, I mean, I loved advertising without really knowing it at the time. There were a lot of City Golf ads that exploded. Castle Lager was always famous for those patriotic South African sports TV commercials with some powerful soundtracks and songs to go with it. I loved sports. I loved going to the Wanderers to watch cricket. So there was a Milkman ad at the time where, you know, those white seats at the cricket where you're not supposed to sit because you're going to block the view of the batsman from seeing the ball behind the bowler. And there was a Castle Lager ad where these guys, they were such cool mates, but they wanted to get right in on the action, so they painted themselves white.
Oh,
They wore white clothes, and then they ended up drinking milk behind the bowler. But when they realized that, cool, they got great seats, but they lost the atmosphere and the ambience of being at the cricket with the beggars that were drinking alcohol and drinking castles. And I think there was something about that ad that was just, it tapped into such a great insight of like being at the cricket, but then where the fun actually is in Castle Corner or whatever it may be nowadays.
So you kind of always, you say you always knew you wanted to be in advertising.
No, I don't think I wanted to be in advertising per se. I mean, for me, I always loved art. Like I was good at drawing. I really loved charcoal drawings, charcoal pencils. So just always loved trying to create with my hands as photorealistic as I could of things that I was observing. Loved drawing. Like that for me was one of my favorite pastimes, both at school and even at home. Loved dinosaurs, all those kinds of things. So for me, I think it wasn't about advertising. It was more around pictures and also storytelling. Like I'm the youngest. I'm the Lart Lamaki. I'm the baby in the family. I have 2 older sisters, a pretty loud mom, and my dad was an airline pilot, so he wasn't at home a lot. And surrounded by a lot of very loud extrovert women, and I had to tell stories, or I had to entertain, my sister's friends. And for me, it was always just having that sort of exposure, like to gain people's attention. And I think also being at a boys' school, like you have to stand your ground to stand out. There's a lot of Darwinism happening and a lot of machismo floating around the airwaves. So, standing your ground and standing up for what you believe in and making sure that you can be smart at debating your way out of arguments if you aren't a natural born fighter, which I wasn't. I didn't know what to do with my fists to throw them around.
So you got to make them laugh, distract them.
And I was pretty good at swimming, and I played a bit of rugby just to fit in with the crowd. But for me, school was a cool space. And I mean, even just looking back, we laugh at a lot of those times and good memories. And most of the guys that I was really good mates with, we still mates today. So I think for me it was a real coming of age going to an all boys school, but it's not the same experience for everybody, unfortunately.
Yeah. So then moving away from high school, you went on to study at Rand University.
Rand Afrikaans University.
Afrikaans University.
And I'm not very good at Afrikaans, but
so how did that go?
They were English subjects. Uh-huh. So even though that was its name, from when I started, there were very specific dedicated classes to English, and there was options for specific subjects in Afrikaans if you wanted to take it. But once I'd graduated, it became the University of Johannesburg as a more representative university and building. And I chose it specifically because there was a BA in marketing communications, which was quite a new degree, and that combined business with advertising and marketing subjects. And for me, I thought it was a really interesting way to start my tertiary experience, because there were subjects like politics and subjects like audiovisual, which was script writing, coupled with business management and the basics around business structure without the intensity of accounts or stats or any of those scary subjects. And for me, it was such a great experience meeting new people, all the mixtures of different extracurricular stuff, from the socials to football. Played a bit of soccer when I was at university, and it was just a really good time of your life. It was like 3 years of intense amount of studies, really good social opportunities. And even now, a lot of the people that I do business with, we have some link to those university times, whether people were at UJ or at Wits or even Rhodes or UCT. I think that's the one thing that you realize as you get older, how important your network structures are. And Tim Ferriss calls it, he says, your network is your net worth. Yeah. And being able to leverage those opportunities is insanely important.
So then once you leave Rao, what happens? What's your first job?
Well, I wanted to be an actor just because I had this innate storytelling thing within me.
Was this after you got your degree?
Yeah. I said to my folks, listen, I've passed now. I was fortunate because my aunt and uncle were both entrepreneurs, and they lived in Northern California. They'd been there from the 80s. My aunt had a very successful furniture business where she sold railroad sleeper furniture. So there were pieces of wood that came from the old railroads here from Zim. There were these beautiful yellow jarrah woods and teaks. And in the actual wood itself, when you polish it, when you varnish it, the yellow jarrah is called that because the yellow actually comes out of it, and using certain varnishes and stains, it actually brings these colors and makes them pop. So she would manufacture a lot of these tables and chairs. They'd get manufactured at the Vaal here. They'd go in the ocean for a few months, get to Oakland, get distributed there, and then she'd sell her furniture at various stores in very premium cities and towns around the state.
Reclaimed wood.
Exactly,
super expensive, yeah.
Some curios, some glass, some beautiful painted items, some wildlife paintings, like that mixture of things that rich people in America would like in their homes.
Yes.
So
whoever has money.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that was quite an interesting experience for me, like, being very blue collar on the floor and like using your elbow grease to shine tables, all the way to seeing the success that can be achieved when you build your own business. And at the end of varsity, I decided to go to Hollywood for 6 months, and I borrowed one of their small little vans and went down to Hollywood. I found an acting school online, checked it out. I phoned up during like the daylight hours of West Coast, and I settled on a place that had a mixture of stand-up comedy classes and acting for commercials. And I thought, let me just give this a crack, because otherwise I'm going to regret it at some stage in my older married dad life. And I did. I went to acting classes. I lived in Hollywood for a few months. And for me, it was a really cool experience, just, immersing yourself in this world where so many thousands of souls go and try and crack it as an actor to make it in the big time,
And then when you came back home, eventually what happened, and when does advertising actually enter your life?
Geez, a little bit of a while later, but I got to a stage where I was trying to stay in the States to be sponsored to work in a marketing job. And then I realized that wasn't going to happen based on timings, the expenses of lawyers, and all the stuff that you need off the back of that. And I wrote a one-man show. So I wrote a play, came back, and for a year I pretty much worked with a friend of mine. She directed it. We produced it together. We built the sets together. And it was a one-man show about being this young boy in a family of extroverted women, like we spoke about at the start of the show. And it taught me everything from managing a budget, marketing a show. So that play became my first startup, and without any real work experience. And it taught me about the importance of promoting something, getting hold of journalists to publish stories about your show, all that kind of thing. And the profits that we made from the Wits showing, we then took it to Grahamstown to the Fringe Festival. And after that showing, it was a lot of hard graft, and also with a lot of uncertainty. And a friend of mine, she'd started a PR agency with one of her partners. And they said, well, why don't you come and work in PR? Let's give it a crack. So I started out as an account executive, which is like the entry-level position in PR. Yep. And there I worked as an AE, and I worked my way up, and for about a year and a half, 2 years, just learned the importance of strategic PR, writing a really good narrative that can then support your client's business objectives. And then I won a fancy dress competition and ended up in the UK. I
wanted to get to that. So you actually have a knack for winning fancy dress competitions, because you've won more than one, no?
Of course. I mean, I'm officially the most decorated Castle Lager superfan in South Africa, with having multiple superfan victories under my belt.
You guys heard it here first. Tell us about those trips.
So in 2007, I ended up going to the cricket with my best mate. I'd broken up with my first serious girlfriend of my life, and I was like, oh, geez, I need a bit of a change of scenery. And then Borat was pretty hot at the time, so I ended up dressing up in a green mankini. It felt like the green of the mankini and the green of the Proteas. It just felt like it was serendipitous. And won a fancy dress competition. My mate and I, Harbo, we ended up going to London together. And we just had the best 2 years there, working, getting jobs. I got a job in PR because that's what I had experience in, and managed to go and watch a lot of sport around the UK, cricket, rugby, football. I worked for LG's agency, and LG sponsored Fulham at the time. So a lot of time at Craven Cottage, nice. A lot of times like really just entertaining media at the box and those sorts of places. So at times I felt like I had my bum in the butter. And then other times, you're working really hard and understanding the complexities of this new world where you don't have a network. And having worked in this agency for 2 years, I started becoming like the guy who knew a lot of answers around social. So I was writing a blog, just messing around. I was obsessed with the analytics and the people visiting the site and what information you could gain out of Google Analytics. And then I was tweeting on the subway, on the underground every day. I was riding buses. I was walking between places. So I was just playing around and just following people and really just learning things from platforms such as YouTube. And in those days, you couldn't buy paid media as an individual. You couldn't buy pre-rolls. Everything was like based around organic sharing, unless you were a brand with millions and millions of dollars, rands, or pounds. And eventually I just said, well, here's an opportunity for me to launch something that is a mix of digital, it's a mix of PR, and it's a mix of activation and real world experiential. And that for me became like the basis of what I call the holy trinity of marketing: digital, PR, and activation. You have to have all of them working hand in hand, because even though we become more digitally savvy, we really crave human interaction. And that's the thing that it's repeated the cycle again since COVID. I mean, it's much better to sit here in person with you than it is to do this over Zoom.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I can get to see like nuances from your face. Do you really like my story? Have you zoned out? You know, all those kinds of things. So I think for me, I'm a huge fan of in-person working and meetings, because you miss so much of the nuance by being remote.
Yeah. So 13 years into the journey of Retroviral, right?
Almost, yeah.
Almost 13?
We'll be 12 now in June.
12
yeah.
in June. Okay, so
yeah,
12
started
years.
in 2010.
Okay, cool. 12 years of Retroviral, my bad.
Yeah.
Where did you think this was going to go? Like, is this what you imagined?
You know, I mean, you know, there's people out there that have vision boards, and they're like, they live this whole purpose-based life where they're like, if you can see it, you can be it, you can dream it. But for me, I think like I see myself as quite imaginative, but at the same time, I think that business is such a challenging thing that needs to be malleable, that you can kind of have a direction of where you're going. You can have this like North Star kind of thought, but I think the reality of what you build is never in line with what you imagined it to be. I think it's always different, and maybe it's better, maybe it's different positively. And I think in my case, I just said to myself, like, I'm a bit terrified, but I really want to do this, and let me give myself 3 months. And then if I don't get a few clients, or I'm not feeling comfortable, then I can go and get a job. Like, I kind of told myself that. I mean, I'm pretty sure I could go and hustle and find employment, but
you gave yourself the option.
Yeah, and I think just telling myself, that was almost my safety blanket.
Yes.
And I think fortunately here we are, 12 years later, haven't had to go and get a job. So that's that for me is like the happiness factor, is that I get to wake up every day. I've got a whole bunch of awesome people that work with me, that work around me, and we get to tackle problem-solving needs to business solutions with creativity. I mean, that's a pretty exciting place to be. And we joke here internally, like, we're not doctors without borders. Like, if your campaign fails, nobody dies.
Exactly.
You know?
I always tell people, like, we're not saving lives here, like, literally. Like, we're not doctors. We don't have hearts in our hands.
And, you know, I think when you can step back and say, like, our job is to entertain.
Yes.
Like, that's a pretty cool space to be in. It's like, that's stuff that people like. A lot of people don't like advertising because we're forcing stuff down their throats. But if you can create branded content that people actually like and want to share, like, that's as good as being a producer for a Netflix show.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking about creating stuff that people like and stuff that win awards, you have a wall full of awards. But the one that I just really want to talk about is the work you did on Crawly for My Creepy Teacher. Now, I'm sure we all had a creepy teacher or two back in high school, but let's talk a bit
This
about...
is creepy with a K.
Right. Please tell us a bit about the campaign that went boom. That was a dope one. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite funny. I think 2020 was such an intense year, and it had been a year fraught with like real hard work and challenge. And the one thing that really stuck out was this documentary about this guy going through a tough time and befriending an octopus, going back to visit it. So my Octopus Teacher, for me, as a person who likes documentaries, who likes content, I just felt it was so different from everything else that we'd seen that year. And then when I sat down and watched it at home with my wife and my mother-in-law, like my wife was so cynical of this whole story. And that for me is always like finding the funny in the obvious stuff, you know, like it's observational humor. It's like, it's how Trevor Noah writes comedy, Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, all the best comedians in the world, they are observing through a lens that other people can nod their heads with and like really buy into the premise. And I think the funny thing of that is, it's a very serious story, my Octopus Teacher. But if you make light of it and you step back and say, like this guy was going through a tough time, he went and swam with an octopus every day. My wife is like, if you neglect your kids and you want to go swim in the sea every day, don't become an absent father that goes and swims in the sea with like a strange alien-like creature. And that was almost like the spark. We'd been doing some stuff over the year with Don Goliath and Glenn Beadham and Pam on a lot of
I
like...
interviewed Donovan, yeah.
Oh, he's such a great guy.
Awesome dude, yeah.
And like I've been working with a whole bunch of these guys that are really good at creating low production value content, either from their phones and then edited by themselves. We've done some stuff with Gumtree, with Donovan and Davina. We did some stuff with Glenn earlier in the year with a little bit of a rip-off of John Steenhuisen interview on SABC. And Glenn and I have always just got on really well. Like, we've got a good relationship. He's directed some of the content for us over the years. I love his stand-up. And then this whole story came out, and I thought, what would be an amazing opportunity would be to spoof my Octopus Teacher, but with a creepy Crawly. And from there, it started as a conversation, which snowballed very quickly. We had a relationship with Creepy Crawly, and we've made a piece of content in 2012-13 with Jason Goliath and Glenn when they were both exploding on the comedic scene. And it was all around, it was almost like Crocodile Hunter meets South Africa. And Jason was committed to wrangling creepies out of people's pools. Like, he had like a deep-seated PTSD from the noise they make when you swim in a pool. So that was quite funny. And I mean, that got like 100,000 views in a few weeks. And at the time, that was pretty viral for its nature. And with this, we went from writing scripts between each other. Glenn wrote a draft, I tweaked it, we went backwards and forwards. He started sending voice notes of what his Craig Foster impersonation would be. It's just so magical, and like that kind of thing. Then we sent the trailer to the client, and I think within a day we had sign off just from bouncing stuff via WhatsApp. And the client was like, cool, I trust you guys, like, go for it. Then it was shot on a Saturday, edited Sunday night, or on a Saturday night, and then on the Sunday it was posted, and just absolutely started going nuts. And what I did was, like, I just kept an eye on every time someone liked it or engaged with it to see if they were influential. So, like, if they were a journalist, there was the deputy editor of The Beeld, for example. She liked it. So then I slid into the DMs and said, hey, don't you want to chat to us about how we made it and the process of getting something out so quickly? And I think that's the thing about our job. When you are tactical and reactive to something that's in the public space and in the public domain, you actually can't rest on the laurels and expect something to go viral. I think that's where we differ, is like, we create content for a specific audience, but then we hustle our way through the distribution and the dissemination process of that. Because sure, you can put paid media, you can run pre-rolls, you can run Facebook ads, but you actually want people sharing stuff organically, because that gives you the greatest opportunity to go viral. And for us, when we post the content, we then have to disseminate it. We have to find the right people that are engaging with it, like sharing it, and then also getting onto mainstream news helps, because so many millions of South Africans still watch ENCA or ETV or the SABC News,
Millions and millions of people, yeah.
If you get onto those channels, it then feeds back from terrestrial viewing into digital, where people will start searching and sharing. And it was mad. It was, covered in Mexico as an ad of the day. It was in the UK. Ladies in Australia were including it on a podcast, and they were like, "Oh my goodness, this is the funniest thing we've seen all year."
South Africa.
Yeah, she goes, "Oh, it's hilarious. Look at that. He's diving with the creepy Crawly." And then, just like stuff like that, it just absolutely spiraled after that. And it definitely helped when that Octopus Teacher team won the BAFTA, when they won the Academy Award. Like, then it got renewed interest. So it just like had these little life cycles that continued to spike. But that campaign was thrilling. It was intense. It was insomnia producing, and also, like you say, award winning. Like, it did an incredible job. I think it won more than like 25 awards around the world. Some of the best local advertising awards that it could win. It was a campaign of the year at the PR Awards. It won a couple of golds at the Luries, which is like our, obviously premium advertising awards. And for me, it just like, it made me feel almost like a sense of relief. And at the same time, you look back in retrospect and it's like, that for me was it takes you 11 years to become an overnight success moment.
Yes.
You know, because we pride ourselves on having made more brands go viral globally than any other agency in Africa. Every year since inception, we've made something go viral at least once with a mixture of our like proprietary thinking and distribution processes and the PR that's mixed in it. And I think that's what's so great about this linear journey that you take your listeners on is like, because I had this PR background, because I had this storytelling background, all that stuff is so important to my life now. And you can always look back in retrospect or in hindsight and everything worked out perfectly as it should. But going on that journey is very important to trial and experiment with where you end up finding yourself. I mean, like nowadays we are creating like documentary style content for athletes and certain sports people, because for me, like I've seen what Last Dance did, I've seen what Drive to Survive did, not just for others but for myself included. And you know, we're just busy rapping on a documentary about Magazole Mapimpi and about township rugby in the Eastern Cape and how it's produced all these like amazingly rich athletes. And you know, it's such a juxtaposition, because administratively such a terrible structure in terms of how so much cash has been lost, yet you've got this amazing talent that's emerged despite all the bureaucracy at play.
Talking about all the success that you've reached and how you actually arrived with to the My Creepy Teacher idea is proactivity. You guys didn't wait for a brief or anything. So I think that's kind of the lifeblood of almost advertising. Like, because a brief is a brief. They can come and say, hey, we want to see a TVC about this and that and that. But when the team is like, hey, I have an idea, those are usually the ones that win you your luries and such, right? Do you agree?
Yeah, I do agree, because I think our best work is work that we are responding to something. Our job isn't to just be communicators. Our job is to be communicators through the lens of what a consumer is experiencing joy, fear, drama, and debate from. You know, so that's why Nando's and politics has always been such a strong connection, because each of us is exposed to politics on some level every day, whether it's on the news, on a Daily Sun, street polls when we come to work, or whatever it may be. And for me, like, if you can tap into a zeitgeist of what your consumer is exposed to, and you can surprise, delight, entertain, or give them some goosebumps around something that they are aware of, like, that's the stuff that's funny. Like, popular culture and making spoofs of it or making reference to it is funny. Like, people having watched Squid Game, there was so much content that came out around Squid Game, Donovan himself included, especially with having a newborn, like, and the juxtaposition of the newborn with playing a game that could kill your life. Like, those are very aligned, and it's a funny example. It's a funny mix.
Dope. I want to get a bit all up in your business. Let's get all up in your business, all up in your business. So this is the part of the show where I went to your social media.
Oh, no.
And I dug up a couple of things that I want context on.
Oh, jeez. Right? I think I'm going to have to pull that. What's that? It's like see no evil, hear no evil little monkey emoji. I think I feel like that's what I need to cover my eyes now.
Don't worry about it. I've got you. It's a safe space.
It's a tree of trust.
Exactly. First one. I like this one. You're obviously a cricket guy.
Oh, I love a cricket.
Life is a test match, not a T20. It's quite straightforward. But please tell us a bit about, like, what are you thinking? Where is it coming from?
Yeah, I mean, I was obviously watching the cricket when I tweeted that. And in retrospect, the Proteas actually did pretty well in their test series against India. I mean, at the time, it looked a little bit touch and go whether we were going to get smoked, but we came through and there was a victory there. And I think T20 methodology and culture has kind of changed the sport of cricket, where we want instant gratification. We want to hit boundaries. We want to see the dancing girls. We want to see the fireworks. Like, that's what T20 is. Yeah. T20 can also be a metaphor for social media. Like, we go on, we get our dopamine hits, we get our hearts, our likes, our shares, all that kind of stuff. But the reality is that those are the things that aren't going to give us satisfaction in life. So life is that marathon. It is something that it has ups and downs. It has W's and L's. And I think that even in business, when you look at people that you admire, whether it be Elon Musk or whether it be someone who is like a successful Amagwinya salesperson on your commute every day, like, it's a lot easier looking from the outside in saying, oh, that person has it made. But you don't understand the lengths that they went to get there, the hours, the sacrifice, the loss of friends to get there. and the impact that they've had on their own life to get to success, or what success looks like from the outside. So for me, I think that everything in life it's the age-old adage of it's a journey, and like you can't expect things to be rushed. Back to that example of like it took 11 years to become an overnight success, and I think that's a great cliche too to use.
There you go. The next one, almost everybody I know has a picture of the Joburg skyline on their profile somewhere. This is a beautiful one. You say your caption is, "It's not perfect, but it's home." Please tell us a bit about how your feelings about Joburg and this picture, and where you are in your mind when you're taking that picture.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite an interesting one. I see that was on the 13th of November. So I think for me, Joburg is wild, and I think that there's just something electric about the hustle. I think, I've been fortunate enough to travel around the world and to live in other parts of the world. And there really is no place like home. I think Joburg, with its imperfections, will always be home to me, no matter what happens in the future. I have been involved in home invasions and armed robberies. Just after that, probably like 3 weeks later, I had my car stolen. So
I didn't want to bring it up.
No, it's okay. We can laugh about it. But I think that, ultimately that was a really beautiful view from a spot in Maboneng. I ended up going to a jazz bar that evening. And I think that South Africa, Joburg in particular, has a lot of warts. And I think that you can't always have everything perfect. I think you have to have the imperfections to balance our existence as people, and I think that Joburg is a wild and amazing place, and I think there are no people in the world like the citizens of Joburg. And I think even here when you travel, like people in Cape Town are very different. People from Limpopo, like people in the Northern Cape, like we have such interesting nuances from this hustle that we live in. And I'm always grateful for having been brought up and from living in this city.
Yeah. Next one. Now you said, Retroviral goes viral at least once a year, or you help your clients go viral. This one is one that I definitely saw. If anybody saw the Survivor billboard on the road years ago, what was it? 2014?
2014?
I knew it wasn't 2017.
2017.
Was it 2017?
Yeah, that was.
In 2017, you guys might have driven past this billboard and you've seen it on the news and newspapers or whatever. Please tell us a bit about this campaign or activation.
So Mnet briefed us to come up with a stunt that could encourage more people to enter Survivor. Because, South Africa struggles with reality shows because so many times the producers will typecast people. Oh, we need this amount of people, these demographics, this age. And it's very difficult to create drama and intensity when you're trying to manufacture it. You almost want people that are going to naturally either argue or get along, Raul.
Yeah.
And with this brief in particular, we thought, well, let's look at a unique way to encourage like a wild card entry into Survivor. And it was a radio and KFM and 947 brief, and it was pretty much out there asking people to enter this Survivor activation, but they didn't know what they were getting themselves into. And then we had 4 winners from Cape Town, 4 from Joburg. I told them to pack a bag, like very light bag, bring a sleeping bag and a pillow, that kind of thing. And then they had to go for health and safety height training. So we said, Mnet owns this billboard, so you're just going to go up here, do your health and safety height training. They came down, we took them for a lovely dinner that evening. And then the next morning, I woke them up at 3:30 and we all jumped into an Uber van, went back straight to that same location on the corner of Santon Drive and William Nicol. And from there, we made the people live on the billboard for 3 days. And they had to eat worms, they had to do puzzles, they had to, have water challenges, just like you would have in Survivor, which we recreated on the billboard. And then we live streamed it via Facebook. People could watch the challenges, see people getting voted out. The tribal council members got to vote for people they wanted out. So we recreated like this mini ecosystem. And it was wild that you would never be able to do this in any other city other than Joburg, which is a nice segue from the previous one. I think Cape Town has too many rules about what you can and can't do. This definitely wouldn't fly in Zillowville. And I ate a worm too, because like, if you guys are doing it, I'll show you that it's safe. Yep, they were mealworms. So I swallowed a few worms, showed people that it's easy to go and get it. Yeah, exactly.
Let's chow it.
Yeah, it's better than Fear Factor.
Exactly. Next one. This was super interesting. So Hashtag Sparkles Arc. I knew that was gonna get a reaction. So guys, this is those who are listening on iTunes, Spotify, watching on YouTube. Please go pause it. Make sure you go like, subscribe, comment, and share. Let's get back into it. Hashtag Sparkles Arc. So I went to your page and I see this loads and loads of beautiful paintings of animals. Now I want to know if you were an early adopter of NFTs or what's going on here.
I should actually consider going the NFT route of those things.
There's a lot of them. You could go for it.
Definitely. We were having our first little girl, and this was in 2017 or 2016 into 2017, and we asked our little boy, like, what should we name her? So he gave the name Sparkles, and then Grandpa was like, okay, Sparkles the unicorn. So her name was that as she was growing. And then in order of doing something to greet her into the world, I started drawing these pictures one a day on Instagram for a certain period of time. I think I ended up drawing like 64 of them.
There's loads.
Yeah, there's loads. And then from that, I used Nifty 250 to print these little Polaroids of each of those pictures. And then unbeknownst to me, my wife actually took that. And then she's also in advertising. So she just wrote a whole bunch of copy for each animal. And then she got it converted into a book. So she turned it into Sparkles Arc, which is like, it's basically like the Noah's Ark of what animals would we include in Sparkles Arc for when she was born and she could read her own bedtime stories, or we could start reading bedtime stories to her. So it was quite a sentimental project. That's beautiful, yeah. Even now, like the girls will still, I've got 2 little girls and a little boy. The little girls will pull out their Sparkles Arc, and then we'll read them some nights at bedtime. And it's one of those really sentimental. That's why it created like this immediate, like piece of joy in my face.
All right, you survived all up in your business, all up in your business. Let's get back to advertising. Please tell us about what you think about the South African advertising landscape right now. What are we missing? Do we need more brave brands? Do the agencies need to shape up?
I think what's interesting is like, South Africans, we have this almost big fish in a small pond mentality at times. And then on the other side of that, like we actually have a lot of us struggle from imposter syndrome.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we look at case studies and ads from around the world, and we only ever see the best of everything. So we don't realize, like, if you were to spend a month in the States and watch some of the TV commercials there, you'd be horrified at what makes it onto TV. So I think comparatively, we actually are one of the best advertising nations in the world. And you see it at like Cannes every year, you see it at the Luries, some really incredible work that makes it out there. And I think we don't appreciate how good our advertising actually is. For me, I think that I was fortunate because I was exposed to working with Black River in those early days when we worked with them on Nando's, and Tilly led that ship. And what was so amazing about Black River 2010 days was like it was one of a handful of truly organically diverse agencies. And what it felt like, it was amazing because it was like you had a mixture of genders, sexual orientations, colors, backgrounds. And that's a great opportunity as a South African agency because you have different experiences and you have different lived experiences of people and what and they insights. Bring to the table. Exactly. Yeah. Because my insights are going to be different from a black female in our office who comes from Limpopo, for example. And I think that advertising is best when, going back to that earlier comment, is a lens of stuff that consumers are exposed to. And for me, my view is very limited to the stuff that I like to watch, that I see, that I'm exposed to, versus someone else who comes from a different background, a different part of the country. And I think for me, it was like, I always wanted to try and emulate a build of that kind of space where you have all these different influences, so you could sit around a brainstorm and people can feel safe to add their view about, hey dude, I actually don't like that idea because it just feels like you being an old white dad now. Like it doesn't resonate with a young black male audience. Yeah. And I think that giving agencies or people within agencies the safety space that they can debate everything from politics to gender to sexual orientation, that only allows for better brainstorms because you have better articulation of an insight or of a premise around the thing that will be the nugget that your consumer can buy into. And for me, I think that advertising is starting to get a lot better with the stuff that, Joe Public and how they've built this really beautiful, diverse mix of people, hundreds of people. The stuff that King James has done and how they, been recently acquired by Accenture. That's a massive deal for a South African agency. And yeah, I think that there's more and more, like also you've got these 100% black-owned agencies like The Odd Number, like Avatar. You've got DNA Brand Architects and the stuff that Sylvester's doing. And I think that ultimately you're seeing better content and better work being created for the majority of South Africans, which in the past didn't exist. And now it's a reality today. And I think that for me is hugely exciting.
Now, what did success look like to a, say, 16-year-old Mike? Was it one day appearing in a GQ magazine, which you've done? Was it maybe one day owning a successful agency, which you've done? Is it maybe having a beautiful family? What did success look like to you as a young man?
Yeah, I think that's another challenging one, just based on like what did success look like from a business all those years ago. And for me, I think happiness with a dose of struggle is what success really is. And I think, to your point, like it's the balance of all those parts. Like, how's the family life? How's the relationship with your significant or better half? Like, what is the relationship with like your staff, with your community? I think that we are all pies and we all have little segments that make up the whole of who we are. And, my uncle, he always used to have this thing about, for him, wealth was about being able to just go to the airport and book a flight anywhere in the world and just being able to go and do that and have that freedom. And I think for me, success is the mixture of the balance of all those parts, and the cherry on the cake is being able to travel. And that's the thing that I've missed the most about hard lockdown. I think you also learn the most about yourself being a minority in a foreign land. And I think, like ultimately, if I could do one thing at governmental level, like I would look at implementing a conscription to travel, where you're able to be put into a different community for 6 months, if you're able to travel overseas for 6 months. Like, the fact is, we become so insular as South Africans, we gravitate to the stuff we know. If we're English, if we're Afrikaans, if we're Venda, you kind of stick to your groups, you stick to your known knowns. Yep. And I think, like, if you could put yourself in a more unknown situations, and the more you realize that you have to understand other people by being the minority in that situation, whatever it may be, the more valuable we grow as empathetic individuals. Yeah.
Now, Mike, thank you so much for your time. But just to wrap it up, please can you give a couple of words to the From A to Z listeners, people watching, people who want to be in advertising, people who one day want to own an agency like yours, people who want to be creative all the time. What do you have to say to them?
Yeah, for me, I mean, commercial arts and creative business in particular isn't easy. Like, we get to see the byproducts, and it's beautiful when you see the finished product a lot of the time. It is. Everything in life requires hard work, hustle, commitment, dedication, and now more than ever, you have the opportunity to carve your own future. Like, you have YouTube videos where you can learn how to design, how to make videos, how to make vlogs. Like, the world really is the most exciting and most opportune in terms of self-improvement, and the best people that have worked through this door have done just that. They've taken a craft that they're really excited about and they've run with it. They've gone in a specific direction and they've made the most of that. And some of those people are still here. Some of them went out and started their own business. Some of them have said, geez, we really appreciate now how hard this world is of actually creating an agency. But that's how we move forward as a population. That's how we eradicate unemployment. We build things and we use our creativity, and sometimes we fail, and failure is okay. Like, the society tells you that failing and not succeeding the first time is not right and it's not good and you must put your tail between your legs, which the research shows the average successful entrepreneur is in their 40s, their mid 40s to 50s. Like, that's a lifetime away. So it's all part of the test match of putting runs on the board, figuring out what you want to achieve, what runs you actually need at the end of the day, and then ultimately being the victor at some stage in your life.
At some stage in your life, you will be the victor. Thank you so much for watching and listening to From A to Z. Mike, thank you so much for your time. Good luck with everything you guys have got going on. Keep making stuff go viral.
Thanks for having me, bro.
For sure. From A to Z, we out.
Peace.
From A to Z, it's plain to see. This podcast is about people in my industry. writers, designers, social media managers. Don't forget the data miners. HRPR, find out who they are and how they made it this far. From A to Z, talk about your family, talk about the goals you reach, talk about the plans you see. Let's get it. Welcome aboard. I'm your host, P. Winnie, and this is the From A to Z podcast.